Item 6 is the 2016 Northern Lights Express fees. That's to continue participating with that group. Item 7 is the agreement with the City of New Brighton for emergency backup water supply and wholesale water, part of our constellation of water customers. Item 8 is the bid of 6th Avenue North Street Reconstruction Project. That's accepting the low bid to proceed with that. That'll be referred to Ways and Means. Item 9 is the bid for construction of the Americans for Disabilities Act pedestrian intersection ramps. And that's accepting the low bid of TZAC Concrete Incorporated for just under $1.5 million to furnish and deliver materials and labor for that work, which is considerable. Item 10 is the bid for the turf establishment, accepting low bid of Lionel Lakes Landscaping to do that work. Item 11 is the bid for large diameter storm sewer cleaning, accepting the low bid of Sewer Service Incorporated to proceed with that work. Item 12 is the bid for gray-black Class A aggregate, and that's accepting the single bid, and we did assess that bid to compare it with other pricing, and it was consistent with Dresser Trap Incorporated to provide that material. Item 13 is the bid for Nicollet Mall reconstruction planting, and accepting the low bid of wetland habitat restoration to proceed with that work for that element, very important element of that project. And that is the consent item. Does anyone wish to pull any item? Seeing none, I will move all items for approval as stated. All in favor say aye. Aye. Dissenting nay. That carries. We now have before us a public hearing, which is two projects, and it's a public hearing, Bryant Avenue North and Warrington Area Residential Street Resurfacing Projects. Good morning, Director Kotke.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. Mike Kennedy, our Director of Transportation Maintenance and Repair, will make the presentation this morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Mike Kennedy, Director of Transportation Maintenance and Repair for Public Works. We're here this morning for the public hearing for the Bryant Avenue North and Warrington Area Residential Resurfacing Project. On January 15th, 2016, the City Council designated the location, streets, and improvements proposed to be made in the resurfacing program for this year for both Bryant and the Warrington Area Residential projects. The locations of the streets in these projects for Warrington, it's as shown on the overhead there, is basically the Warrington residential project, but it also includes 4th Avenue, which is an MSA street from 38th Street to Lake. And Bryant Avenue North is Bryant Avenue North from 45th Avenue to 53rd Avenue North up to the city limits. The proposed street resurfacing special assessments were determined by applying the 2016 uniform assessment rates to the land area of benefited properties located within the street influence zone along the improved streets. 2016 resurfacing assessment rates that were applied are 63 cents per square foot for non-residential properties and 21 cents per square foot for residential properties. The proposed total assessment amount for the Bryant and Warrington area residential projects is about $1.5 million. There were community meetings held for both projects, and so today our recommendation is passage of a resolution ordering the city engineer to proceed and do the work and adopt special assessments in the amount of $235,020.11 for Bryant and $1,287,466.49 for the Warrington project, and passage of a resolution requesting the Board of Estimate and Taxation to authorize the city to issue and sell assessment bonds in the combined amount of $1,522,490 for these projects. That concludes my presentation. You can take questions if you'd like.
Thank you. Any questions per the presentation? Seeing none, thank you very much. And I will now open up the public hearing. Anyone sign in? Does anyone wish to come forward and give testimony? Anyone wish to come forward? Seeing none, I will close the public hearing and move approval per the staff presentation. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Dissenting nay. That carries. Thank you very much. We now can move into our discussion section of the agenda, and with that we have three items. And the first item is item 14, the Minnesota State Aid System revisions.
Mr. Chair, Nathan Koster from our Transportation Planning and Programming Division will make this presentation.
Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. My name is Nathan Koster, Supervisor, Transportation Planner, and Transportation Planning and Program Division of Public Works. This morning, I'll be providing a presentation on the municipal state aid street system revisions. I provided a brief presentation overviewing what we're requesting this morning and a description of our work as well as our recommendations. This morning, we'll be requesting passage of a resolution requesting the Minnesota Commissioner of Transportation to make removals from in addition to the municipal state aid street system of the city of Minneapolis. This impacts wards 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 11, 12, and 13. In advance of this resolution being prepared, outreach was conducted with all the council members, which we were bringing forward recommendations for removals and additions to the state aid street system. So as far as the presentation and discussion today, I'll be providing a background of what exactly the municipal state aid street system is, as well as a discussion of what our assessment was to make these recommendations, and then identify the recommendations that are being brought forth today. As far as the background of what is the municipal state aid system, the municipal state aid system was established by the state legislature in 1958, and this allows cities with greater than 5,000 residents to designate up to 20% of their local system mileage to the municipal state aid system. And this is a source of transportation funds for the local transportation funds provided by the state, and this is generally the source of the highway user tax distribution fund. And typically for the entire state, this is about $170 million, of which the city of Minneapolis typically obtains about $16 million annually. The selection criteria for these municipal state aid streets is typically streets that already carry heavier traffic volumes. Their collector or arterial routes is defined by the functional classification system. They connect major points of interest such as parks, commercial areas, and they're formed with an integrated system such that municipal state aid routes connect with other trunk highways, other municipal state aid street systems, and other county routes. So it's more of a grid network. The reason why we brought forth this recommendation today is we took a broader systems assessment and evaluated currently what are all the streets in our municipal state aid system, trying to align those with the goals and criteria identified in the city's transportation plan, Access Minneapolis. We also wanted to take this chance to look at our system as a whole, to take into consideration changing land uses, recent construction projects, evolving traffic patterns, and modifications to the transportation system with capital projects that are occurring throughout the city. And this is also a good time that there was some revisions of the state aid funding formulas, so we wanted to make sure how well we were aligning with those. So this work included reviewing our current municipal state aid system and non-existing municipal state aid system routes, determining where there would be room for potential removals from our existing system and additions to the system. And as a part of this is the goal is establishing a framework for changes that could be implemented over time, such that we are bringing forward our near-term recommendations today, but also laying forth a framework for midterm and long-term changes. There were a number of factors and criteria that we took into account as for this methodology. That includes the average daily traffic volume on these streets, that I'll refer to as ADT, looking at the street typology, functionality, and context. I'll dive into that a little bit later in a following slide. Looking at the multimodal characteristics, if it does serve existing truck traffic, and as far as the system continuity and connectivity, how it's tying in and integrating with our existing system. Other special considerations that were taken into account were if there were one-way streets, the adjacent MSA systems of adjacent cities such as St. Louis Park, Robbinsdale, and St. Anthony, and non-existing routes currently on our state aid system but are non-existing, and future transportation projects, and additionally payback requirements such that if we have used MSA funds recently on a MSA project, that we were not required to incur additional funds to remove it from our state aid system, because if we take something off that we'd recently used funds on, we would incur a cost. So we want to take that into consideration as well. So I color-coded what the assessment entailed. It's more along the lines of a four-tiered system as far as, is there very good alignment with our current method, the factors and criteria laid forth, good alignment, fair alignment, and poor alignment. And what this took into consideration, as I previously mentioned, was primarily the average daily traffic volumes, the functionality of the street, as I refer to as street typology, the location within the city, and the connectivity to other routes, and making sure all the termini of the streets were extended to the nearest adjacent system. So making sure we align, we really want to tie this to the existing functionality of our street system, such that Access Minneapolis defines a number of street typologies, and I color-coded these as well to tie in with how well they align with our system, tying the functionality of the street towards our recommendations to make sure that anything that is on the state aid system aligns with the functionality and characteristics of a state aid street, such that our commuter, commerce, activity, and community connector streets that do serve higher purposes are very strong candidates to remain on the system, or if they're not on the system, let's look to get them on. And then when you see the orange to red routes, those are more of the routes that don't serve as a great functionality of serving traffic or connecting major points of interest. Those were either, if they were on the state system, they were looked to be removed so that we could come up with a number of recommendations. So as far as the recommendations that we did bring forth, I did mention that we looked at a number of factors and criteria. And one of the main points I do want to bring forth is, out of the 206 miles of municipal state aid system routes we have, roughly about 85% of those routes are already aligning with a lot of the factors and criteria mentioned. So it did leave a very small subset of routes that were looked at for removals from the current system. So what we want to do is set up a framework to implement these changes over 5 years, as I had mentioned. So today we brought forth our near-term recommendations, which is approximately 3.5 miles coming off and going on. So there's an equal swap. And in order, when we bring forth these recommendations, we have a cap of 20% of our system, as I mentioned, which is 206 miles. So we had to balance both the additions to and removals from the system. So what we wanted to focus on today, or on our initial near-term recommendations, is with our additions, we want to add routes that already are serving and providing mobility for higher ADTs and align with the factors and criteria such that they serve a higher functionality, and then remove routes that have lower traffic volumes and aren't serving the higher uses as defined by this analysis. So I'll briefly go over the requested removals from the system and the additions to. And today we're bringing forth removals of approximately 3.5 miles. I'll briefly cover these on the screen, then I'll display a map so we can see them visually. But the removals we're requesting are Cleveland Street Northeast, Summer to Broadway, Summer Street Northeast, Cleveland to Stinson, Winter Street Northeast, Hoover to Delano, Delano Street Northeast, Winter to Spring, Harding Street Northeast, Broadway to Summer, Summer Street Northeast, Taft to Harding. And I think I went through quite a bit there, and I think this is a good point just to bring up the map and just briefly identify where some of these streets are. There's a way to zoom in. But primarily these routes that I had mentioned, the first 6, are located in Northeast. They are very short segment streets serving very low traffic volumes, under 500 vehicles a day, and primarily serving local land uses and single properties. The next streets I'd like to highlight that would be for removal would be 5th Street South from Chicago to 11th. This street is located downtown, and this street is being removed with all the construction with the Vikings Stadium, US Bank Stadium. So this will no longer, we're requesting this no longer be in the system, seeing as how it's a road closure. The next grouping of streets that we are proposing to come off the system would be Diagonal Roadway from 24th to Koster, Granary Road, 11th to 25th Ave, Oak Street, 6th Street Southeast to Diagonal Roadway, and Malcolm Ave, Granary to Koster. And these streets are primarily non-existing routes. They currently are planned routes, and since they are non-existing, they do not carry any traffic volume. So aligning with our criteria, we'd like to put more roads on that currently do exist and do carry traffic volumes. Then the last two routes that I would like to highlight for removals was Snelling Ave, 22nd to 24th, and 24th Street Southeast, Snelling to Minnehaha. And on the map you see here, these are also two very short segments serving primarily adjacent properties and having very low ADTs. The requested additions totaling approximately 3.7 miles, I'll walk through briefly. 33rd Ave Northeast from Central to Stinson, Van Wyck Memorial Boulevard from 7th Street North to Glenwood Ave, 20th Ave South, 4th Street to Riverside, 36th Ave South, 34th Street to 38th, 54th Street West, Xerxes to Upton, 58th Street West, Lyndale to Nicollet, 10th Ave South, 3rd Street to 2nd Street, 3rd Street South, 10th Ave to 12th Ave, 12th Ave South, 3rd Street to 2nd Street, and 2nd Street South, 11th Ave to 12th Ave. And I'll briefly highlight these on the map. Thirty-third Ave North, indicated here with the black line for the additions, is an extension of existing state aid route from a neighboring city and adjoining to Central Ave. Van Wyck Boulevard, highlighted by the black line in number 39, would be creating a connection from 7th Street to Glenwood. This route carries approximately 5,000 vehicles a day and would provide additional connectivity in the state aid system. And Route 45 is an extension of 20th. This provides the last connection from Riverside to 4th for a short extension of an existing municipal state aid route. And since the map's already on it, highlighting the last four I called out in downtown, 10th Ave, 3rd Ave, 12th Ave, and 2nd. Primarily all of the city streets in downtown are in the municipal state aid system, providing both circulation and access to a lot of the downtown land uses. And these were identified as routes that do carry moderate traffic volumes that would enhance the integration and connectivity of the downtown municipal state aid network, which is why they were added or recommended to be added. Route 59, this is an extension of 36th Ave South. It is already an existing municipal state aid route and is looking for an extension from 34th Street East to 38th Street East and does carry moderate traffic volumes in this area. And then the last two routes would be 54th Street West, which would be highlighted on the map by number 60, and this would be looking to extend the municipal state aid route from Xerxes to Upton. And then the last one I'll be calling out today would be 58th Street West, Lyndale to Nicollet. And this would be extending 58th for the segment between Lyndale and Nicollet. And it already carries moderate traffic volumes for this segment. With that being said, this concludes my presentation. I'll stand by for any questions that you do have.
Councilmember Gordon.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the report and also how thorough it is and the criteria. And I don't necessarily object to any of the removals. I will note to my colleagues here that the second ward is a clear net loser in all of this in terms of who's losing MSA routes, if that's where we think there might be something good. And typically when we have an MSA route, we appreciate that because it also it offers an alternative funding. But there's some roads that were planned that never got built, and this is in the Prospect North area. There's a Granary Road. I'm sure everybody on this committee has heard of that, an extension of Malcolm, a connection that's missing. So my question and what I think that is going to be important for me to be able to share with, there's 18, 19, 17, and 20, share with residents and constituents back there is, if something happens in the next year or 2 or 3, where all of a sudden we have more interest in actually completing some of these gaps and missing infrastructure, and I have hopes that we will, it may not be the line that's on that map, but somewhere. How much flexibility do we have to add a route back? Is that something that has to come back to the council for approval? How much notice would we need? Those kinds of questions.
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Gordon, that is a good question. And much like the presentation today, this would require another administrative change and request. And seeing as how we did a more holistic study looking at a number of routes for additions and removals from the system, you see the numbers aren't sequential. So there are a lot of other ones that we didn't bring forth today that would be more in the mid to long term. We could do this similar thing as far as bringing forward to put them back on the system if there was movement towards or other plans to construct those routes. And the designation of the municipal stated system particularly doesn't imply any priorities or recommendations for these routes. It's merely looking at the criteria and allocating our mileage to currently existing routes that carry higher volumes or have a higher purpose that we could get on the system for additional needs-based funding.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Any further questions or commentary? Seeing none, certainly appreciate the thoughtfulness that went into this. We now have a very transparent system for evaluation, and I think that will serve us well moving forward. So particularly as we look at the mid and long-term adjustments that we might contemplate. So appreciate the work and definitely appreciate the tool we have before us. With that, I will move a resolution requesting that the Minnesota Commissioner of Transportation to make removals and additions to the municipal state aid system of the city of Minneapolis as described in the staff report. Any further conversations? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Dissenting nay. That carries, and thank you very much. We'll now move to item 15 on the discussion area of the agenda. That's the Franklin Avenue, Cedar Avenue, Minnehaha Avenue intersection modifications project.
Mr. Chair, Alan Klugman from our Traffic and Parking Services will make the presentation.
Morning.
Good morning, Chair and members of the committee. Today we're seeking layout approval for the Franklin Cedar Minnehaha intersection modification project. I think, as you know, this area has been studied and examined for many, many years, and the current effort that we'll be talking about today has been in the works for about 2 years. Now, the project we have before us today is a joint effort with Hennepin County and City of Minneapolis. And as you know, Franklin and Cedar are both county roads. Minnehaha is a city street. And so the county has led this effort. They've led the development. The city and the county have partnered together with it, but the county has led this. And for today, I'd like to introduce one of the members of the county design staff who managed the project, and he'll lead us through some of the details of the project, and then I'll stay by nearby for any questions and to wrap up the presentation today. But what I'd like to introduce is Bob Byers. Bob is a senior transportation engineer with Hennepin County. Again, he's managed the development and design of this project, and he has a short presentation that'll show some of the features and highlights of the new design. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome and good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, council members. Yes, I'm Bob Byers. I'm with the Hennepin County Public Works. I've been working away, as Alan mentioned, for the last couple of years on this item. And we'd like to give you a brief presentation of kind of where we're at with this project this morning. Certainly, if ever a picture gives you 1,000 words or provides 1,000 words, this is it. This area, I think most of you are aware, has been under discussion for many, many years. It goes back to the dawn of time when the railroads were added, and you can see a transportation system of a diagonal nature that tries to meet the gridded nature of Minneapolis. And and all the challenges that then exist when you try to bring those two things into conformance. There's been a need for improvements for some time. There's been some things that have been done as well, but there's always been things that have been left behind, issues that have never really been resolved. And this area has really had high crash rates, high safety issues for a number of years, still does today. As my examples kind of on the bottom of the slide there show, it's been a top 10 crash problem for bikes. It's been high on the pedestrian crash lists for a number of years. A couple of years ago, the Pedestrian Advisory Committee brought this as an option of priority. It's been an option and priority for the bike group as well. And from the vehicle standpoint, it's also been a problem, primarily due to some of the visibility problems and just a busy area, a lot of traffic trying to go through this area. So it's confusing to motorists. It has some strange things of nearby highway ramps, but it's not obvious as to really what lanes you should be in and how you should get there. But there's some really good things that have been going on. As I mentioned, some improvements that have been done. The county and the city have been working away along the Franklin Avenue corridor for a number of years trying to get the bikeways added. And to the east of this area, we've got them pretty much all the way to the Mississippi River now along Franklin Avenue. The city has a project this summer east of Riverside to the river where they're going to convert to a what's called a protected bike lane to improve the safety even further. And the county is rebuilding the Franklin Avenue Bridge across the Mississippi, and we also are adding what's called a protected bikeway system as part of that. So we're working our way down the corridor, and this is one more element from the bike standpoint that goes kind of hand in hand with that. At the same time, the Native American Community Development Institute recently has been working with a project on this big wide median that's underneath the overpasses there of Highway 55. And they've been trying to change that area in its view and make it sort of a destination, sort of an art area, something that a marketplace, something more than just a wide grass median. We've been working with them. That project kind of evolved over the last couple of years, and they have built some improvements here in the last year or so. And that project brought into question, what about this area underneath the overpasses? It's sort of a strange freeway design that doesn't match the way Franklin Avenue looks on either end of this project. It's a vestige of things that have happened over time, decisions that have been made, but doesn't really fit the character of the area. And about the same time that conversation was going on, our maintenance folks were telling us that the pavements on Franklin Avenue and Cedar Avenue were reaching the end of their life. They needed to come in, do some milling and overlaying. So that raised the question of perhaps there was an opportunity to look at some of these issues again. The way we approached it was maybe a little different. Rather than trying to develop a plan and then present it to everyone and say, here's what we think ought to be done, we knew that there had been challenges in the past. One of the reasons that some of the larger scale improvements had not been built, we believe, is that there was an issue of developing consensus. There are lots of ideas, and there was this big vision of improvement, but how do you bring everybody together to something that everyone can accept, can buy into? So what we did is try to approach a number of the stakeholders, a number of the folks who had ideas, had been drawing away for years, things that they thought should be done, and try to take those ideas and develop it into some sort of a plan, something that we actually could handle right now within the resources that we had. And that's quite a challenge, trying to keep something within a scope, within a cost that you really can deal with. There was a lot of back and forth discussion about that. So in these stakeholder and public engagement efforts, that's really what we were trying to do. And as you can see, the neighborhood was a real big part of this, helped us through that discussion. Seward Redesign, who's an advocate for redevelopment and a link to some of the business interests, also was very, very much a help in this discussion. And a new player, the Minneapolis Bike Coalition, actually stepped in and helped us in a number of ways in terms of reaching parts of the community that we normally wouldn't have coming to some of these meetings, groups that maybe are a little harder to get to. So they helped us in this. So these groups kind of working together with us really were a key thing in terms of trying to trying to reach this consensus that we're trying to get to. So what are the elements that we're talking about, the key improvement elements? This green area here in the center of the drawing is a removal of portion of Minnehaha Avenue, which has been a vision in a lot of these ideas for a number of years. It's basically taking that portion of the roadway out. And what it does for us is it tries to get back to that gridded system and take out part of the diagonal problem of some of these strange maneuvers, travel patterns that go on. By taking out that portion of Minnehaha, it allows us to take out the traffic signal that exists right there at Minnehaha and Franklin, which is very close to the one at Cedar. By doing that, it allows us to concentrate at Cedar and Franklin and make that one single intersection work a lot more efficiently. But it has trade-offs. By doing that kind of a thing, it changes travel patterns. It changes how people would have to go through the area, and it makes it a little more circuitous to get to Minnehaha Avenue. So that brings the third element there of providing a southbound left turn lane. Maybe can I use the cursor? So, yeah, here it is. So down here, in that spot, we provide a opening, which is not there today, in the median to provide a southbound left turn lane to continue a movement back to Minnehaha to the south. So that kind of goes hand in hand with these other changes that we're talking about. As you can see, there's some pink areas on the drawing, and those are basically extensions of concrete medians and so forth, channelization that we're talking about adding. What that does is it lines up a lot of the vehicular traffic so that they can see, they have the right visibility so they can see to make their maneuvers. And that's one of the problems in the history today in terms of the crashes, is that especially left turners don't have the visibility on the rush hours to see beyond the waiting queues on the other side that are trying to turn left. And that results in a lot of crashes because they're taking chances in terms of making some of those turn maneuvers. Of course, I mentioned the extension of the bike lanes. So part of this thing is to continue those things to the west through the NACD project that's there on the median and keep on rolling to the west. It helps us, these improvements here help us bring up the visibility of the pedestrian crossings and tries to tighten up some of those crossings, make them a little bit shorter than they are today, make it a little more obvious as to what is the travel pattern for pedestrians through this area. And actually that's really how all these elements sort of come together. They try to, whether you're a driver, whether you're a bicyclist, whether you're a pedestrian, it tries to give you information as to where should you be to best traverse this area. And by doing that, we think we can reduce a lot of the conflicts and improve the safety. And there's a couple of city operational changes too that I think Alan had in the paperwork here that talks about some changes to the street system just to the east. So here on 20th Avenue, which right now is a one-way northbound, we're talking about modifying that to two ways to allow two-way directions, and the same thing here with 9th Street. And the reasons behind that is actually to try to mitigate some of what we're doing that's going to affect those local property owners right there in that northeast quadrant. Taco Bell, for instance, this is a fairly significant change for access to that property. And Resources, Inc., who's just to the north of Taco Bell, also, it's going to have some impact on how they get to their property. So by providing a two-way 20th, we thought that would help mitigate that somewhat. But that pink line in the center there across, I'm going to keep switching here, but across Minnehaha, this is a serious change. It eliminates the ability to turn left off Franklin to go south on Minnehaha, and it also eliminates the ability to come north on Minnehaha and turn left. So that changes some of these travel patterns and makes some of them more circuitous. They're not major movements today. They're fairly small movements, but nonetheless, it will affect some things. So we had to talk with the fire station because it affects them. Their emergency vehicles coming in and out, as well as, like I say, the local property owners. So I think that pretty much summarizes the elements that we're talking about here today. I guess if there are any questions, or Alan, if I missed anything. And
Well, thank you for that overview, and I'm glad you took the time, and many people are familiar with this sort of beastly constellation of intersections that I think this will go a long way to tame. So, Councilmember Gordon.
Thank you very much. And this, I think perhaps I was even president of the neighborhood association back in the 90s when discussions about this started. Because when the LRT line went in, the Hiawatha line back then, there was concerns about access to it and even development potential. And so this has been a long time in coming. And I have to say I've gotten lots of compliments, especially recently, about the county and their work with the neighborhood group and with businesses in the area. And this is fantastic, and I'm very supportive. I've got some questions or some things that I'd just like to highlight that maybe are unfinished yet. The one issue that I'm not sure is clear is how bikes are supposed to get from Franklin, especially if they're heading west up to the light rail station so they can get on that Hiawatha Trail. Actually, there's kind of like deer paths on both sides of Franklin right now that people use, or pedestrian paths, but they're openings, and there's a sidewalk that some bikers use. So it's confusing. It's a piece I'd love to have clarified. Is there a theory about how that's supposed to happen? And also coming off, I guess, from the station going east, that's unclear too.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, Councilman Gordon, yes, there are a number of ideas there, thoughts, and there's actually some things in the works that probably will help improve it. They're probably going to move on separate kind of timelines from what we're trying to do with this work, but there is some redevelopment going on along Cedar Avenue that Seward Redesign is involved in. That trail along the east side of Cedar eventually will connect down to the Hiawatha Trail, so there's a connection there that's coming. These shortcuts that you mentioned that kind of try to work their way kind of, there's all sorts of cow paths and so forth that people, as they're trying to get to the station, we've looked at some of those patterns, and there are ideas to try to improve them, but some of it involves negotiation with local property owners. Some of it involves actually city-owned property and how we might work with some corners that the city owns to try to improve it. So yeah, there are ideas with a network of how you could travel through this area and get to the station on bike, but some of them kind of required things that went beyond what we could do within the timeline of what we're doing right now. But that doesn't mean that we're not going to stick with it and continue.
And I'll call out another one of those is where 20th, if you look where the freeway is and where 20th is, I don't know if my colleagues can see that, but it's also where 9th Street and 20th kind of meet at that intersection. You can also see some clear paths leading up that little slope. That's where a lot of bikes and pedestrians will go now as they're coming back and
here on the area.
Yes. So that's something to be worked out, and I'm pretty sure the MDOT is involved maybe in that too. It's awfully close to the freeway anyway. And which calls attention to one concern that I have, because Augsburg College is right up there. So you go, that's where people will go to get there. It's also 20th is the major bike path that gets you into the University of Minnesota campus. It's a significant connection that we've built. And a lot of bikers and pedestrians who are getting to Augsburg and the university or coming from there want to avoid this horrendous intersection. So they'll take this path and they'll go down to 20th and 9th. The two-way will allow some flexibility there. But then when you get to Franklin, if you're a pedestrian or a biker, and the way it's shown on this, it looks like there's actually a pink, it probably won't be pink when it's built, but there's a pink, that would be fun though. There's there's a median there that says bikers and pedestrians shouldn't cross there. We don't want you to cross there. If you're a pedestrian and you get there, you'd look, and it would seem pretty ridiculously far away to get to a light to actually make a crossing. So I'm pretty sure if it was me and a lot of other people, we'd cross there anyway. There's also 2 lanes of traffic coming in one direction and then 1 lane and a bike path in the other. I also think a lot of bikers will decide they're just going to work their way over or around that too. Have we thought about that? And would there be any way to make it safer and easier for bikes and pedestrians? Well, we also don't want to have cars and trucks using it.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, Councilmember Gordon, yes, all of those things you mentioned. There's been a lot of discussion. There's a lot of ideas. I'll quickly mention a couple of things that may help this situation, maybe in the next year or two, depending on how opportunities go. On So let's see, start on 20th, maybe on my little cursor here. Here we go. So the city is coming through in a couple years, building a protected bikeway down 20th. It's not right now known how that's going to be configured, but it looks like there might be a possibility of connecting here at this cow path. In other words, we may have an option here of trying to emphasize or trying to facilitate this north-south movement that you're talking about, that people are going to want to go anyways. There's a redevelopment of the old Blue Nile site that's being discussed. As part of that, we've talked about, can decisions be made with the city and with the property owner to try to leave some ability for us to widen that median, pull the property line down a little bit, widen that median on Franklin to provide a two-stage crossing, refuge island kind of design that would allow this connection from Minnehaha across Franklin up 20th to connect to that protected bikeway. So that's another one of those things, kind of like the other group of things we talked about, that they're sort of in abeyance at the moment, but we are thinking about them. And the idea is that we will, when the opportunity occurs, we will try to step in and make those future improvements as well. Like I said at the beginning, that's been one of the problems maybe holding us back over the years, is that the vision and what we want to do is so large that if we try to do it all today, we just can't get there. But if we do this incrementally, we believe, and we keep our eye on this thing, we believe we will get there. It's going to take a few different increments of improvement to do this.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that, and that we're thinking about that for the future too. And just generally, I'm very supportive of where this is going, and I'll keep an eye on it too as it moves forward.
Councilmember Bender?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't go back as far as Councilmember Gordon, but I remember very early discussions of this project too, and it's really evolved. And I really wanted to commend the county and our staff for doing such an engaged process for designing this roadway. I think when we ask the community what they want to see, especially in this iterative way, we're really able to get to some great things in the city. I wondered if you could talk more about the space that we get back from this pretty bold change of removing this section of Minnehaha Avenue. And I wondered if there had been discussions about redevelopment of this area. I'm looking at the sort of large surface parking lot nearby, realize that's privately owned, but I imagine there had maybe been discussions about that. I could see why the community might prefer a green space, but just wondered if you could talk through some of the discussions that happened about what to do with the space that we get back.
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Bender, members of the committee, very good question that you raised. And I guess what I would just stress is that as part of this project, we'll be closing off that piece of Minnehaha. The pavement will come out, it'll grass or sod will be put in. And really the thing I can tell you now is that the points you brought up are well understood with our design team and with the neighborhood stakeholders, but truly nothing's advanced on that is what I'd have to tell you.
Who owns that section of right-of-way?
Well, that's City Street, Minnehaha.
Or the county?
No, Minnehaha, the part we see in green is City Street.
Owned. Okay.
And I'd also point out that there's large utilities underneath there too, in addition to the street infrastructure. So there's significant efforts that would need to be looked at if something were to happen there. I think part of your question also had to do with Taco Bell as the adjoining landowner. We've had numerous conversations. We've been actually to their corporate headquarters, the local franchisee, a number of times to keep them abreast of this project and keep them in tune with what's happening. I'll just tell you this, at least at this time, they've expressed no particular desire to be involved with that property or to look at development or anything like that. So we've just kept them in the loop in terms of what's happening and fully understand that there'll be continued discussions in terms of what's the use and function of that property and how's it maintained into the future.
So in the short term, it will simply be green space like grass, and then potentially in the future, we'll be able to look at other opportunities.
Correct. Yeah. And one detail, very small detail, but I'll point out, as part of the design plans, that area will remain fully lit and sidewalks that are adjacent will remain in place. So people still be able to access through there. We're going to change the light pattern a bit so we can get at them and maintain them, but it'll remain a lit area. It just won't be kind of an abandoned piece there.
I think that's very helpful information. I strongly in favor of this incremental approach. I do think it seems like a little challenging space to have just kind of an open green space in the long term. So hopefully we can continue to work with CPAD and sort of others to look for resources to make it something really great for the community, whether that be a more active green space or something that incorporates development.
Right. Yeah. And one more comment I'll bring up. At one of our neighborhood meetings, we had a little bit of a brainstorming session, more than a little bit, and we had a whiteboard and ideas were recorded and listed and recorded, and they just span the gamut in terms of uses or activities or options for there. So we know we're kind of at square one in terms of what those plans might be.
Thank you. Any further questions or comments? Seeing none, again, commend the work that we have before us. I think we do have a great framework for additional work moving forward, as has been suggested by other council members, and look forward to that work, actually. And hopefully we can keep the partners at the table and their energy and insights. We don't want, sort of this big push and then everything to kind of wither away. So let's keep on track with that. And so hearing that, I will move approval of the project layout as prepared by Hennepin County, and approving the street operational changes that have been described in the presentation. Any further conversation? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Dissenting nay. That moves forward. Thank you. Now go to our last item on the agenda, which is the 3rd Avenue South redesign project from 1st Street South to 16th Street South. Layout approval, cost estimate, easements, and direction to proceed. Director Cockey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess we'd ask your permission if prior to our presentation on the 3rd Avenue, if Ben Hecker, our Deputy Chief of Staff for Mayor Hodges, could make a short presentation regarding, really, I refer to it as Access Minneapolis, our downtown, and as it relates to planning for bike facilities downtown.
No, very appropriate to snap out to the context from which we make our decisions.
Thank you. As Director Cockey said, my name is Ben Hecker. I'm the Mayor's Deputy Chief of Staff, and thank you for the opportunity to speak to your committee today. Because the council is being asked to make such an important decision downtown with the redesign of 3rd Avenue, I wanted to provide you with a little bit of background and an update on the city's Access Minneapolis plan. I'd like to leave you today with a few key takeaways. First, like I said, putting the decision on 3rd Avenue in context of other decisions that have been made downtown already and some of the things that are contemplated as part of that plan. Second, by making sure that there's a common understanding at the city and with the public that the city does not want to put a bike lane on every street. Instead, we want to prioritize quality and safety of the facilities that we put in place. And finally, I want to take the opportunity to look forward to some future opportunities that a decision on 3rd Avenue could provide in the future. So the focus of the presentation today is primarily on the north-south streets for a couple of reasons. 3rd Avenue is a north-south street, and as such, it is affected by decisions that have been made on other parallel north-south streets. And also, 10 years ago, before this plan was put into place, the north-south streets downtown were a complete mess. Before the plan was put in place, like I said, there were a lot of problems, including the fact that buses downtown were spread out across all streets. That led to serious congestion in the core along Nicollet Mall, Marquette, 2nd, and 3rd. Local buses and express buses intermingled, slowing down bus traffic throughout the core. There was no capacity for bus expansion, and downtown Minneapolis was not ready for bus rapid transit. There was nothing rapid about a bus sitting in rush hour traffic in the morning or in the evening. In addition to that, both 1st and Hennepin Avenues were one-way streets. There was one advantage 10 years ago, and that was that on 2nd and Marquette, we had dedicated bike lanes. So the answer to the transit challenge that I just described was specialization. A federally funded project, Mark II, led to an expansion of what were the single transit lanes on Marquette and 2nd to 2 transit lanes on each that allowed buses to pass each other. Before this change, the fastest bus was limited by the slowest bus. But now, added bus capacity on this street means that we can reroute buses off of all the other streets downtown. And there's good news. that change worked. There were a number of benefits that we've seen already from the change, including the fact that local buses are now separated from express buses. That reduces congestion. And on other streets parallel, there's been a benefit as well. On Nicollet Mall, we've seen a 40% reduction in bus traffic. That fact has allowed us to